This episode of Multiamory is brought to you by Adam and Eve. For 50% off almost any item, plus a free gift and free shipping, use promo code MULTI, M-U-L-T-I, at checkout from adamandeve.com.
So they studied people's fighting styles. I'm a fan of Tiger Crane style myself.
I was just gonna make the same joke.
If you're happy with the same old ways of dating,
If you enjoy sucking at communication,
And you have no desire to improve your romantic life, then our podcast might not be for you.
but if you want some out-of-the-box ideas to deepen your current relationships,
broaden your sexual horizons,
develop a better understanding of yourself,
or learn more about non-monogamy,
Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jase,
I'm Emily.
and I'm Dedeker.
and this is the Multiamory Podcast.
Songs I know I did, forcing me to form myself to fit.
On this episode of the Multiamory Podcast, we're talking about the science of happy relationships.
Yeah, we have all kinds of stits and stats for you guys.
Yes, you know we love our
And
stats and stats.
I do want to thank the lovely Joshua, my partner, who sent us an infographic that kind of got the ball rolling with this whole thing. And in the notes for this episode, we'll definitely put a link to the infographic there.
Yeah. So there's this awesome infographic on the site Happify, which I was not familiar with. However,
yeah.
Nor was
this
I.
infographic is fantastic, and I think my favorite part is that at the bottom of the infographic they include all of their references.
Which
Yeah.
is nice,
Which
because
is
you see
really
a lot of
nice, yeah.
infographics out there
They're
that
just like,
give these
whatever,
statistics.
just pull this out of
but
our ass,
yeah.
like just believe us.
Yeah,
Be distracted by pretty graphics.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
anyway,
I was.
But reading this infographic really inspired us to talk about, I guess, just the things that are scientifically proven. And I mean, mixing
I don't know
science.
if we can actually use the word
I was going to say,
proven
but
in this
like
case.
mixing science with like something squishy like emotions and romance and things that are like so fallible on this human level is a little bit hard. But these are things that have been studied by research institutes.
Yeah.
And they've made an attempt at kind of trying to figure out what are the trends in happy relationships. Like what are the practices, what are the behaviors that happen in happy relationships?
Yes,
But we will say that this infographic is mostly studying traditional couples. So, unfortunately, there's probably, we may eventually be talking to someone who has done some research on polyamorous couples or polyamory in general. But this is going to obviously delve more into just relationships in general, I guess. But we were talking about the potential for what this would mean for polyamory and multiple relationships at once.
Because I mean, what I do like about the information that they present here is that a lot of articles or research studies about like happy couples or healthy relationships will often tie in this whole thing about fidelity and faithfulness. And I get from traditional values, of course, if you're faithful, it's probably going to be a healthier relationship from a traditional standpoint. However, the information that we're presenting in this episode has to do more with things like communication, with sexual practices, with the way that you support your partner, things like that. Things that can apply
the way that you fight.
Yes, the way that you fight. The things that can apply to any two-person relationship, regardless of whether it's monogamous or not.
and we've actually been talking about some of these things in the way that they apply to our three-person relationship doing this podcast.
Yeah.
So even taking it outside the realm of specifically like a romantic and sexual relationship, which is, more what it's geared toward, and that's what most of the research is about, is relationships that are both romantic and sexual, because that is, by our culture and unfortunately still by a lot of science, is treated as the default that everyone should assume that they want. But
the
still,
end-all, be-all.
right, but even then, taking a lot of these ideas and things and looking at them even in how they show up in our professional relationship with the three of us it's definitely enlightening. It's like, oh wow, cool, like we do that thing, that's great, or oh okay, we need to keep this one in mind, or whatever it
our
is.
three-person podcast baby co-parenting relationship, you mean?
Well, and not only that, but our three-person emotional triad that we've had for years and
Yes.
years and years. So.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's hop into this. So the first thing we want to address is communication and interaction. So the ways that people in happier relationships, healthier relationships, communicate with each other and interact with each other. And there's some really, really interesting things, particularly about ratios of interactions.
Well, and this reminded me of Gracie X's thing.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
Totally.
Yeah, the lovely and wonderful Gracie X talking about the dopamine versus cortisol ratio. And how, and I thought that this delved right into that, because this is saying that a happy couple has 5 positive interactions for every negative one.
Right.
And that unhappy couples tend to have 0.8 happy encounters for every 1 negative interaction.
Right. So, with essentially meaning more negative interactions than positive ones, right?
Sure.
So I was trying to do the math on this. I also think it's weird that they did their ratios this way. But anyway, so if it's 5 to 1, that's essentially a little less than 20% of your interactions are negative. Right? So over 80%. And if I recall, I think Gracie X's ratio was 80%.
It was like 80-20.
Yeah, it was 80% positive and 20%, stressful negative feelings in terms of a relationship. That was her criteria for, what was something she would accept in a relationship. So I think this is interesting that it's very close. Yeah, not exactly the same, but it's close.
I think the more interesting part of this is the unhappy relationships, like the 0.8 like positive encounters to the 1 negative encounter, because it's almost a 1-to-1. It's almost a 1-to-1, as in for every positive interaction you have a negative interaction. And I think that actually maybe there's a clue there as to why people have such a hard time leaving bad relationships, is because you can kind of end up feeling like, well, 50% of the time, or close to 50% of the time, it actually feels okay. But then 50% of the time, it's not okay.
Right.
And so it's...
And then we think maybe that's an acceptable ratio.
Yeah. It's like maybe with confirmation bias, if we really want to hang on to a relationship, we're so focused on trying to focus on that 50% of the time where it's positive.
Yeah.
And not realizing like, hey, actually, like even like that 50% negativity helps to cancel that out. Which I think is interesting, because I think a lot of people are waiting for it to feel like it's, more of the time is negative than positive.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we've talked before, way long ago on our breakup episodes, about this thing of people will say like, I'm not very happy in this relationship, but I don't have a good enough reason to break up.
Yeah.
As if our default state is in a couple, and so it has to be so bad to be enough of a reason to get out, rather than your default state just being you. And if it's like, oh, this isn't great, so I'm gonna get out of this. Like that we do have this, I don't know if it's just a cultural thing or if it's even deeper than that, and some kind of fear of being alone or something, that I do think makes a lot of people, myself included, hang on to negative relationships a lot longer than might be healthy.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep moving us along because we have a lot of information to get through.
For sure.
So something else that they cite here is that the determining factor in whether couples feel satisfied with the sex, romance, and passion in their marriage is, by 70%, the quality of their friendship with each other. So the better of a friendship that you have with a romantic partner, the better you're going to feel about all those other things that we typically associate with a romantic relationship.
Yeah. And you do hear that thing like, my wife is my best friend, or my girlfriend is my best friend, or whatever. And I guess there is some science to that.
Yeah, well, I also, like, if I can, again, get on my sort of relationship anarchy / multiamory soapbox here.
The well-worn soapbox.
The well-worn soapbox is
this falling apart, but
this idea that we're taught to make this distinction between romantic and sexual relationships and friendships, as if those are different things. Yet seeing here, the friendship is
like the important part, like the most important part,
is much more important than the romantic or sexual component in terms of the actual happiness there, by 70%. So I just think this idea of approaching romantic relationships and friendships differently from each other, this is just another indicator to me of like how not actually useful that way of looking at relationships is.
And I think it makes sense because I think that if you do have actually a strong friendship with somebody who's your romantic partner, I think that makes it so much easier for getting through the times when maybe you're not feeling so sexual or romantic with this person, which happens to everybody. Sometimes that comes and goes in waves, that you'll go through periods of not feeling very sexual or maybe not even very romantic or very passionate. But if that friendship is still there, then that doesn't mean the entire relationship crumbles, which I think happens to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something we've talked about in the past is the ability to give your partner the benefit of the doubt once in a while, like we
you give
do
your
our friends.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so maybe if you see your partner in, you know, some of the same light as you do your friends, you're able to say like, well, maybe they're just kind of having a shitty day. Maybe that's why they're being kind of shitty right now, and not take it so personally or take it to heart so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
The other one is that it's really important for, you know, if you want a happier, healthier relationship, it's obviously important to cultivate a lot of positive interactions. So now you know what the ratio is.
Right, this is your goal.
It shows that, like, you need to be working overtime on making sure that you have at least 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative one, and not that you need to be doing math in your head. But I think it means that you do need to be constantly putting an effort towards crafting and cultivating your relationship. And it doesn't need to be huge things. You know, this particular infographic suggests really simple things like giving your partner a compliment, showing your appreciation for them in some way, reliving a fun memory together, or doing something for them. And of course, this is a great space where love languages come into play.
Yeah,
you know, figuring out what your
totally.
partner's love language is. If it's gifts, it means buying them a thoughtful gift. If it's acts of service, it means, you know, going out of your way to do something for them, do some kind of task for them. So definitely, you know, have those conversations with your partner about love languages. You can go to the love languages website, take the quiz, figure out what your love language is.
Or you can just listen to our episode about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In which we also direct you to the website to take the quiz.
Yeah, but have your partners do the same thing so that you know what you're dealing with them as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Sweet.
So
So-
the next topic to talk about here is sex.
Sexy sex.
Sexy sex. So, like we were saying, you know, I like that friendship is this most important foundation. But for people who are sexual, which is the majority of people, it is an important factor in happiness in a relationship. And what this particular study is saying is that having sex 2 to 3 times a week leads to the happiest relationships. So we had some questions about this one.
Yeah, I would really love to see this studied more because
Right.
obviously when you're in a multi-partner relationship and you're not just having sex with one person, how does this still apply? Is it like if
Right.
you as an individual have sex 2 to 3 times a week and each time is with someone different who you also have like an intense, deeply bonded relationship with, that is the same amount of happiness? Is it like if just you as an individual are having sex 2 to 3 times a week, just regardless of who
Right,
it's
that's
with?
my question. Is it 2
the
to 3
sex
times
itself that makes you
per
feel
week
better, or
per relationship that makes them happy, or is it just as a person having sex 2 to 3 times a week, you'll be happier across the board?
But it does say that the once a week boost, even having sex once a week, makes people 44% more likely to have positive feelings. Again, that's the question of whether or not that's per relationship or just period. But
Right.
I mean, I'd argue like if you're seeing someone once a week and having sex with them when you see them, then you're probably going to be cultivating those positive feelings for them.
Right. And
Yeah.
again, it's that, you know, something that, you know, lots of people have talked about in terms of having multiple relationships in non-monogamy is this idea that, you know, by having this new, exciting, invigorating sex with someone else, it also reinvigorates my existing relationship.
Absolutely.
And just, you know, that's something that hasn't been studied. That's all just kind of anecdotal, right? It's like, oh, people say, oh, I've observed this. But I am curious if having that kind of sex, or even having other kinds of casual sex, or even things like cuddle parties that's just touch that might not
Yeah.
even specifically be sex, I'm really curious how those things would also play into happiness. But I do think that overall we can take away that being physical is important.
yeah, definitely,
totally.
definitely. So let's move on to responding to your partner's triumphs. And so, of course, this immediately evokes all of our discussions around compersion, the big old famous polyamory PR phrase. So this infographic is interesting because it talks about the like a really crucial factor in a healthy relationship is the way that you celebrate your partner's good news, and that healthy relationships, people demonstrated things like showing enthusiasm for the other partner. They would ask questions about their experience. They would congratulate their partner, and they would relive the experience with them. And so from a traditional standpoint, it could be something like your partner gets promoted at work, or I don't know, some other kind of personal victory. Maybe they
Maybe they successfully asked someone out on a date.
Well,
right?
yeah, okay,
so
that's the thing, is if we're kind of looking into multi-partner relationships, obviously this can be different. Like, we're kind of getting into this realm of things that people are not used to being happy about for their partner.
But yeah, I mean, if somebody, for instance, has sex for the first time with a new person, or says "I love you" for the first time, then cultivating that, compersion, or just continuing to kind of celebrate those triumphs with your partner, I think that obviously is going to be a really good thing, and definitely like making a relationship better.
It's definitely something that not a lot of these would study.
Yeah, definitely.
No.
Definitely. And I think
we got to get our own study.
An important takeaway here, especially for somebody who maybe you haven't like organically experienced compersion yet, like maybe wrapping your head around your partner going on a first date or having a good time or having first sex with somebody, like that's still a little bit wibbly for you, or like still feels a little awkward for you. I found in my personal experience, sometimes fake it till you make it actually works out really well. So like maybe you can't like jump for joy if your partner comes home and is like, oh yeah, I had sex with this person for the first time. Like maybe you're not going to be the one like cheering and hollering and clapping and giving a high five. Maybe you will be, and that's great. But doing simple things like just asking questions or congratulating, or, just showing that, giving at least a show that this is a positive thing and that you want your partner to feel supported in this, even if you're not just like effervescent, bouncing off the walls, but even just these little things of supporting your partner's victories can really go a long way.
Yeah, because at the bottom of this, it says, in one study, people who did this 3 times a day for 1 week increased their happiness and felt less depressed afterwards. So I guess that goes along, like, it's really helping out the person who's doing it, not just your relationship, but the person who does the act to feel better and less depressed. Because you're reveling in someone else's happiness, and that can help you as well.
When I was last on retreat with the good old Buddhist nuns that I like going on retreat with, there's actually a Buddhist concept called mudita, which I thought was just joy. It was always translated as joy, but then I learned on that retreat that it's joy at the success of others specifically, like totally like compersion.
Right.
And the way that one of the nuns put it was, she's like, this is the easiest one for me to cultivate because it's like happiness for free, basically. It's like I get to celebrate somebody's success and I didn't even have to put in any work towards it.
That's really cool.
And like that was a totally different way of thinking of it. I was like, wow, like I didn't think about that as like, oh wow, I get this free thing to celebrate that I didn't even have to work for.
Yeah. That is really interesting.
Right?
Yeah, because jealousy of our partners isn't limited to just romantic and sexual things.
Yeah, definitely.
No, definitely.
It can definitely come up in, job-related stuff, if, especially if one person is having a lot more success than the other. Even as it relates to, our topic of wanting things that you don't want, your partner could have some success that's not even something you've been wanting or striving for, but can still feel jealousy about that. But knowing that there is this mudita or compersion could be a useful thing. Even just knowing like, hey, you know what, maybe I could just switch my mindset about this. This doesn't have to be a negative thing. And I wonder actually if, because this breaks down, like Dedeker was saying, the specific things people do when they, positively affirm someone's achievements, like asking them questions, kind of reliving it with them, asking them to kind of retell the story, congratulating them on it. I would be curious to see if you're having trouble feeling compersion, whether it's for their, other romantic things or just for their life in general, to just go through those motions.
Yeah.
Of just doing those things. Be like, oh, tell me about it. Let's relive the story together instead of kind of shutting down and pushing it away. I would bet, based on my experience with similar things, I would bet that would actually make you feel a lot more compersion than you did before.
Yeah, and also not make it be this thing outside of yourself that you're like, oh shit, what is it? I'm scared about it because it's fear of the unknown. And you actually get to experience it with the person and then be like, oh, that wasn't as scary as I thought it would be.
Yeah, totally.
Did we just say
All right.
totally at the same time?
We did say
God,
totally.
we're disgusting.
Totally. No, see, you guys do that all the time. I think we're going to talk about that in a second here, but first, we're going to talk about ads.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys, one of the best ways that you can support our show, if you're getting something out of this show, if you're enjoying it, if you're finding that we're adding some kind of value to your life, the best way that you can support us is by becoming one of our supporters on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/multiamory. So for choosing to donate a certain amount of money per month, and it's all very small amounts of money. You can pledge $1 a month, $5 a month, $9 a month. You get certain perks. For $5 a month, you get access to our private Facebook patron-only group, which so far has just been a fantastic discussion space, a fantastic space where people support each other, fantastic space where people reach out looking for advice and help from other people. At the $9 a month level, you get access to our monthly video discussion groups, which we just had like a week and a half ago or so.
Yeah.
And those are always just so great. Like our last discussion group, we talked about a variety of topics, things like how to meet other poly or non-monogamous people in real life, offline as opposed to online. We talked about dealing with a partner who's dabbling in sex work. We talked about planning vacations. All kinds of numbers of different things.
Right. Things that were actually going on in people's lives. We got to share and talk about those and get feedback from the group, which is really amazing. Another thing that you could do if you don't have the money or don't feel like spending money on this show is just to write us a review on iTunes or on Stitcher. It'll take you a couple minutes, and it's hugely helpful in terms of getting the word out there. It lets us show up higher in search results, and it helps other people to know what they're getting into. If they're like, I don't know if I want to commit 45 minutes to listening to an episode, but they see your review where you talk about what you've gotten out of it, might make them more likely to check it out, and ultimately hopefully would lead to more poly people out there for you to meet.
It's a long game.
It's a long game, but it's self-serving in the end. It's great.
It's a win-win. And like we talked about at the beginning of this episode, Adam and Eve is our sponsor this week, so you get 50% off of almost any item, free shipping, and a free sex swing by using the promo code, damn it, I can't say promo code, MULTI, M-U-L-T-I at checkout. So again, that's 50% off of any one item, free shipping, and a free sex swing. How exciting. So the next part of this infographic was sharing an experience together, which makes sense. I mean, it says couples who have new experiences report feeling more loving and supportive towards one another and more satisfied in their relationship.
Well, I do think it's interesting that it's new experiences. It's not just kind of we watched this show together. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that could be a new thing, but it's kind of doing new stuff together. I think that's important.
They're creating new memories together. And then I think that you can call back to those memories later on in your relationship. Remember that time when we did this?
Remember that time we watched that show together?
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't have to be anything crazy or far-reaching. They talk about things like just going on an evening walk together, going to a new restaurant that opened up, exploring some kind of new place. That could be a far-off exotic land, or it could be just like a new part of town that you haven't explored yet. It means cooking together, going to a concert, like all really, really simple things. But if you're continually investing in creating those memories together, then that helps you in the long run.
Something that Dedeker and I have been doing for a while now is going on walks together. That's something that we've realized recently, just in the past few months, was something that we started doing because we were dog sitting. And so we had to get up every morning to walk the dogs, and found that we just really enjoyed that time. So we've kept doing it even when we're not dog sitting.
And the funny thing is that if I just read this, or someone just told me, try going on a walk with your partner, and be like, whatever, silly. But it's actually been really nice just to have that little bit of time every day, where I don't have my phone on me. I'm not trying to work on something. I'm not trying to cook. I'm not distracted by anything else. We're just walking and just...
Right, and that you're not in the house, so there's no chores looming.
Yeah.
None of that.
Yeah, I used to do that with my high school boyfriends, going on a walk around around, and that was super fun. But yeah, something Josh and I have started doing is every single Saturday we like take an entire day to like have an adventure, and that can be to go on a hike together, or I think we're gonna go have high tea at the Peninsula Hotel sometime, which will be super fancy, but it's not always that fancy. It was going to see Wonder Woman and going out to dinner last week, and just anything kind of fun and new, but again, just sharing an experience and like carving out that really special time to be with someone and to do something cool.
It reminds me a little bit of the advice that I feel like I hear so often, whether it's monogamous or not, is just the importance of scheduling dates with a longer term partner.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
And I think it falls into the same thing. It's because you're intentionally making time to have experiences together. What I do think is interesting about this, though, that kind of adds another level to that, is the importance of those experiences being new, that you might get a little more value out of not always doing the same thing, even though I do love those. Like Brooke and I always get sushi together at like one of two places. That's like our tradition. But also doing new things together is, to kind of find a balance of those, like having your routines and also new things, I think would be how to get like kind of the most bang for your buck out of those date times.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I think it colors the whole week in a lot of ways too. Like if you set aside some time, it like kind of makes the whole week special in a different way than maybe it would be if you were just doing the whole thing or the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And while you're on these dates, you may find that you end up laughing about some things, which leads us to our next point. And that is having shared laughter is the term they use here, which essentially means having kind of inside jokes or having like, oh God, remember how we just died laughing at
so
whatever?
The specifics is that there was a study where couples who were asked to recall a moment that involved shared laughter reported being more satisfied in their relationship than people who were just prompted to recall a positive moment.
I see that was specifically
so it's
laughter.
specifically about like, remember this time that we cracked up over whatever.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think obviously this is setting the stage for like having inside jokes seems to be like a good thing in a relationship.
That's the thing. It's like an inside joke is essentially like a short-coded way of saying, hey, remember that time when we thought this was hilarious together? Right? I mean, that's essentially what an inside joke is. Is it's now a reference to a thing that was a joke at one point that made us laugh.
Yeah, I think the three of us do that pretty frequently. I know the two of you do, but I've had a lot of inside jokes with Jase over the years, and I think the three of us have our own. It's cool. Yeah,
well, we were just before we recorded this episode, Emily and I were talking about this like robot dance that we would do to this one part of one song, specifically when it would come on. Right, stuff like that, where it's just like, even right now, just mentioning it made us all giggle a little bit, because this is this shared laughter that we've had many times.
But
of
what
just
I like about
randomly breaking
that,
out
though,
into this dance
of you guys sharing that is the fact that that happened at a time when you guys were still in like a romantic sexual relationship.
True.
But it's like, even though your relationship has changed, that's still a thing that you can positively recall, and that it still helps bolster your relationship, I think is a huge thing to point out.
Right,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
Shall
all right,
we?
Going into one sadder part of all this.
Oh, right. Well, I don't know.
Doesn't have to be sad.
It's actually not.
So they studied people's fighting styles. I'm a fan of Tiger Crane style myself.
I was just gonna make the same joke.
See, there it is.
Remember
Case
the time?
Remember the time we cracked up about Kung Fu fighting styles?
Oh my God. To all the listeners, this is what I deal with on a daily basis with these two. No, it's good. We all have our little things.
Oh, boy.
They just have a lot.
This was something that I hit on in my book as well, is that I think it's so important as an individual for you to have the willingness to examine what your fighting style is, because everyone has one. Trust me, you have one. If you think that you don't have particular behaviors or patterns that you fall back on when you argue with somebody, go like ask your parents and your siblings and your former partners. Like, if you don't think that you have patterns, trust me, they will educate you on what your fighting style is.
Jase, what's my fighting style?
Oh dear.
Oh geez, let's not get into that.
Let's not do this right now.
Oh damn it! I was really interested to know. All right, we'll do it later.
Well, but I think it's so important to be able to know that about yourself and to be able to recognize what are the more unhealthy things that I do so that you can work on changing them.
Well, and I do think that a lot of this we do learn somewhere.
Yes,
I think that this isn't like an inherent thing. I do think it's something that we can change
Yes,
about ourselves. I've definitely changed a lot of my fighting styles
so
and things,
completely.
like the ways that I deal with conflict.
Yeah, there are so many things that I know I picked up from my parents,
Exactly.
from the adults that were
lot of
around
us-
me.
A lot of it we pick up from our parents. I think we also pick up a lot of it from TV shows, especially
gosh,
if we
yeah.
watch a lot of kind of family relationship based shows and stuff like that. I think sitcoms are
Interesting.
some of the worst culprits of this because
They're all dicks to each other.
Yeah, because
dicks
for
to each
dramatic
other.
tension, you need to,
Right?
you
And
need that.
And that it's not like in a drama or in a lot of movies where you see these like bad conflict styles that then that relationship ends up not being the one they stay in. But in sitcoms, that's like, it's about a family, right? And this is, they're married and every episode is about them and they're funny and they're likable, but they do these really terrible ways of dealing with conflict or these really not so good things when they fight because people relate to it.
Yeah.
But it teaches us that that's normal and that
that there's no
and tricks us
consequences
into
for that.
thinking it's healthy,
Yeah.
which I think is the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So in these studies, they found that unhappy couples will do things like criticize each other, show contempt for each other, roll their eyes at each other, call each other names, get defensive, or just like completely tune out and stonewall, just like, la la la, I'm not listening to you,
Yeah.
like, nope, you don't know what you're talking about, that sort of stuff.
For those of you that are familiar with the Gottman Institute, and they're a research institute that has studied relationships for years and years and years. Unfortunately, they still mostly focus on like married couples, monogamously married couples. So most of their data
Yep.
is based on that. However, it's gotten to a point where it's something ridiculous where like they can watch a couple for like 6 minutes and be able to predict
Yeah.
with 90% accuracy whether they're going to stay together another 2 or 3 years, something
Yeah, I
like
forget
that.
exactly the numbers,
It's
but-
crazy, and they're the ones who came up with this idea of the quote unquote 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in relationships, which are these behaviors. It's criticizing, showing contempt, getting defensive / blaming, or stonewalling, or tuning somebody out. That they found that in relationships where these behaviors came up again and again, like chances are the relationship was not going to last.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that these are really serious problems in a
Yeah, and we
relationship.
should, I mean, we do want to do an episode specifically on conflict where we probably cover
Yeah.
these things more in depth, but
Yeah.
but we won't get to that here. Let's talk about the things that happy couples do when they fight or
Yeah,
when they're
so-
trying to resolve conflict.
Well, and I found this interesting, and I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, that you use humor to dissolve tension, express affection, or concede on certain points that their partner makes, which I think that's a really, really good one. To be able to, like, be fair to the other person in the middle of the fight and say, like, okay, I understand where you're coming from, like, that's a good point right there. And to
Yeah.
not just continue to get defensive over and over and over again
No, that's
regarding
so huge
a certain topic.
because I think I feel like we're so socialized to think that like essentially if I concede on any point that means I'm saying like you win and I
Exactly,
lose.
like, I'm
we're
not gonna win.
So I think that's why it's often so hard for us to, because maybe your partner does make a valid point, but because we're in this kind of like me versus you mentality that it's really hard to be able to be like, okay, yeah, you got that point, but like let me still talk about these other points, that it's more of this give and take rather than a battle, I guess.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think that part of that comes from the whole idea of thinking about it as a competition or about something where one person wins and one person loses. And that is how we're taught to think about things, unfortunately. In our like speech classes and debate classes, it's also presented in that sort of way.
Yeah.
And that's the way we see political pundits and
Yeah.
like everyone, it's this very combative thing. But if you think about it in a relationship, I think a different way of framing having those sorts of arguments or discussions is that we're both working together to try to come up with a solution to this. That it's not about who's right or wrong, but like, okay, let's not worry about being right or wrong and instead try to come up with a solution that's going to work, that's going to make us happy, that's going to resolve this situation.
Yeah.
So then you don't, like, neither person even has to necessarily concede completely that like, oh, you're right about all these things. It becomes more about, hey, we're going to solve a problem together.
Yeah,
and there's still going to
it's-
be tension in that. but that it's not
But
about
it's
winning and losing.
collaborative. It's collaborative instead of combative.
Yeah, it's this us versus the problem rather than me versus you.
Yes.
And
Yeah, that's great.
I found that sometimes an argument has to start out, it doesn't have to, but it can start out with a little bit of me versus you, but then once it clicks into that us versus the problem, at least in my personal experience,
That's when it
de-escalates
starts to-
so quickly after that.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, before we move on from this category, here where it talks about how people in happy relationships will use humor to dissolve tension. It reminded me of a story that you told me, Jase, about your family growing up, about the GER thing.
Oh,
Can you
God.
talk about that? Because that's what it reminds me of.
So I guess this was around the time that I was in high school, but basically somehow, and I don't even remember how this got started, but something that myself and my mom and a little bit my brother all picked up was saying "grr," like a growl, like the sound of a growl, "grr," to mean like that I'm mad at you or I'm upset with you. And so instead of being like, "God, I'm so mad at you right now," it was like, "I'm grrring at you right now," meaning like I'm not happy with what you're doing. But because it was just this little bit silly, it like didn't escalate things. It kind of was like, okay, yeah, I understand. Like, I don't know. It was just this silly, goofy little thing. But yeah, I was telling Dedeker about that, how just saying this, like, I'm grrring at you right now, or like, oh, this makes me grr, was this kind of cute way of still expressing like, hey, I'm not happy about this thing, but kind of, I don't know, in a way that didn't have to be so high stakes. Like it added this just like little touch of humor to it. That made it easier to talk about things.
I feel like we've picked up on punch a little bit.
Right,
For when we're frustrated.
from the Jet Jaga theme song.
Or, wait, no, I guess Listo is a little bit different.
Oh,
but,
yeah, Listo's a little bit different.
We'll get to that one in another episode.
Yeah.
Teaser. That's a teaser.
That's a teaser.
For something.
Yeah.
Listo? Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Are we bringing this bad boy home?
Let's bring it
do it.
home.
So the Michelangelo Effect, which is becoming your ideal self because of your partner. And it says couples in the happiest relationships bring out the best in each other. They help each other to get closer to becoming their ideal selves, which is interesting.
Yeah, so what's cool about this one, you can look up the source for this.
Yeah, we
in
actually
that
went to the original
infographic.
academic article.
Right, that the whole study is available for free, which is nice. You don't have to, have an account to one of the many super expensive research journal sites out there. So this one, you can actually read the results of the whole study if you want to get super academic on it. But essentially, the takeaway from it is that there's two parts. The first part is that your partner is affirming of you. So basically that you're getting positive feedback. It's not like your partner's criticizing you saying, hey, you need to get better. They're saying you're great, right? They're affirming you. And to get real specific, it's that you perceive that they are affirming you. So it's more about how it's received than about necessarily what's given.
That makes sense, though.
But to simplify it, that your partner is affirming you. And then the second part is that you choose to then move toward your goals, like toward who you want to be, rather than away from it, right? So these are two separate things kind of coming from both sides of the relationship. But if both of those things are in place, which is essentially a desire for self-improvement and also getting positive affirmation about yourself from your partner, that those couples will be the happiest. And I thought that was kind of a cool, like, hey, look, we're all going to lift each other up here together by being positive and not by being each other's critics or each other's, boot camp sergeant,
drill
right?
sergeant.
Like,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which I feel like some people do want in a relationship. They want their partner to be the person that is telling them, like, whether or not they're doing okay, or they want them to be the person that's, like, constantly, changing them or something. But I would argue that other relationships in your life should do that, not necessarily the person who you're in a romantic relationship with.
Yeah, that's something that I came across that advice a long time ago, not about non-monogamy at all. Before I was really learning much about non-monogamy, was just this idea that your romantic and sexual partner should not also be the person who is your personal trainer, who is your policeman, who is your accountability buddy, all of those things, because those involve a little bit of tough love that is going to work at odds with having this more relaxing romantic and sexual relationship together.
Yeah.
So kind of the importance of having a good friend group or a good support group, whether that's an actual support group, like some kind of a small, support group, like Dedeker did one through Landmark once that was really helpful in getting your book going. People recommend men's groups or women's groups, or it could be an online group like our patron community on Facebook or our video discussion groups, or even just your local poly discussion group. But finding people there to do those things, to help you be accountable, to help you be someone to answer to about doing the things you want to do and being the person you want to be, so that you're not trying to put all of that burden onto someone that you also then want to enjoy kissing and having sex with.
Yeah, because you don't want to look shitty in your partner's eyes or feel like you do.
Yeah.
Or are any of those things.
It's hard for us to compartmentalize that, I think. I think that's why.
I agree.
Yeah. I think if we had brains that could perfectly compartmentalize, like, okay, here now I'm like sexy lover mode, here I'm like caregiver mode, and here I'm like personal trainer mode, and like none of it bleeds into the other, that'd be great. But since our brains don't work that way, it's important for us to kind of keep those things separate as much as possible on our own.
Or a Cylon.
And that as humans, we're meant to be in social groups. We're not meant to just pair bond and live off in yurts together.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something humans have historically done. It's not something most primates do, right?
Yeah.
We're meant to be in tribes and
Only
in groups.
Gibbons.
Only Gibbons do it.
Only Gibbons do it.
The only monogamous primates, and they just go off as a couple and live together, not around any other
not around anybody
primates.
else. Yeah.
Right?
Weirdos.
That's very different from what we do and what all the other primates do. Yes. All right. Thank you all so much. I loved this stuff.
Yeah,
I love
me too.
Stits and stats and talking about it all.
And happy relationships.
Thanks again,
man.
Josh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to when we can finally start the Multiamory Research Institute. And
God, it would be great. Yeah, if
Right?
someday we can make like the non-monogamous alternative relationship
is
version
like
of this infographic would be
no
awesome.
joke. Very seriously, my dream. Maybe this will be one of our later Patreon goals.
Of creating a research
guys.
institute.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
far-reaching,
Keep it coming.
But in the meantime, speaking of Patreon, that's one of the places that you can find out more about us and you can help support this show. When we hit our goal of $1,500 a month, we're going to start offering transcripts. We're actually going to be able to hire people to do transcripts of all of our episodes.
I'm super excited for finally having that.
Which will be great. I've definitely had a lot of people request this,
Yeah,
and it's
so
just so logistically complicated.
It's very time consuming.
But we finally decided it would be worth prioritizing that money toward it. So spread the word. If you haven't supported us yet on Patreon and you feel like you'd get something out of this show and out of that, then please support us and help us hit that goal so we can have transcripts of our episodes.
Yay.
Yay!
If you want to find more of us, you can find that at multiamory.com or on Facebook at Multiamory. Also, we're on Twitter and Instagram and all those other places if you just search for Multiamory.
You can also email us at info@multiamory.com, or if you want to leave us a voicemail with any of your questions,
Yes.
comments, things like that, you can call 678-MULTI-05.
Or you can leave us a voice message through Facebook Messenger if you are international or don't have a phone.
Okay.
Who are you?
Who are you? How are you listening to us? Okay. Multiamory is created and produced by Emily Sotelo Matlack, Jase Lindgren, and me, Dedeker Winston. Our episodes are edited by Mauricio. Our social media wizard is Will McMillan. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP.
Hi, I'm Mike Joseph from the Jericho Chronicles radio show and podcast, and you're listening to a Swingset podcast at swingset.fm.